June 29, 2025. 6 Russian military ferries had crept into Ukrainian waters before dawn, silent, steely, and deadly. Each was loaded with troops, armor, and ammunition. More than 380 elite soldiers, 24 armored vehicles, and tons of explosives. Their mission? A secret landing designed to flank Ukraine's southern defenses. No satellites had spotted them. No radars had tracked them. Every move was timed, every route planned. To the Russian high command, it was the perfect infiltration. A ghostly force crossing the sea under the cover of darkness. But they didn't know. They were being watched. The Ukrainian generals had devised a plan that would wipe out this Russian landing. What happened next will show you that anything is possible, and you can never assume you're safe until the war is over. Come find out with me. At precisely 03:14 a.m., under the cover of night, the Black Sea was silent. Until it wasn't. 6 Russian military ferries, heavily modified for stealth amphibious operations, cut through the waves, heading west from occupied Crimea. On board, over 380 Russian troops, 24 BTR-82A armored personnel carriers, and multiple tons of artillery shells and small arms ammunition. Their destination? A swampy inlet 120 kilometers east of Mykolaiv, a radar blind spot carefully selected by Russian military intelligence and marked as safe. There were no satellites overhead, no drones, no radio chatter. From the Russian commander's viewpoint, this was a perfect insertion, silent, untraceable, and devastating in potential. The objective was to establish a forward beachhead before sunrise and push north with mechanized infantry support by 0600 hours. Moscow had banked everything on this gamble. But in the thin air, 6,000 meters above the sea, an eye watched in absolute silence. An unmarked UAV, a modified Ukrainian PD-2 reconnaissance drone, hovered motionless between thermal layers in the atmosphere, its infrared sensors mapping heat signatures with surgical precision. It had been upgraded just 2 months prior, outfitted with enhanced data link capability and a stealth airframe coating. At 03:15 a.m., it spotted them. 6 thermal anomalies, moving in close formation, giving off heat signatures consistent with diesel-powered engines and onboard personnel. It didn't attack. It didn't even move. It simply reported. Every 10 seconds, the drone sent encrypted bursts of telemetry, video, and thermal data to the Ukrainian Joint Operations Command in Kiev. Each image clearer than the last. The data packets were time-stamped, geotagged, and cross-verified by ground-based radar arrays. The invasion had been discovered, not by satellite, not by radar, but by a $30,000 UAV hiding in plain sight. Russia didn't know. They believed in the perfection of their stealth plan. But Ukraine now had the advantage of time. And in war, timing is more lethal than firepower. A battle hadn't yet begun, but the battlefield had already shifted. And the hunters were about to become the hunted. If you were in command, would you strike now, or wait for the perfect kill zone? Let us know in the comments below and join me in watching a Ukrainian general make the right decision. At 03:16 a.m., just 1 minute after the first drone report, a secure alarm triggered inside a fortified military command bunker beneath Kiev. The encrypted feed from the PD-2 UAV was routed directly to a war table occupied by Ukraine's top generals, intelligence officers, and drone warfare analysts. No one spoke for the first 10 seconds. Then General Anatoly Vashchenko, commander of the Southern Operational Group, leaned forward, eyes locked on the screen. The Russian ferries were exactly where he feared they would be, inside the most vulnerable stretch of southern coastline. If they landed, Ukrainian frontline units in Mykolaiv would be surrounded in hours. "Don't fire," Vashchenko said calmly. "Not yet." The room turned to him in disbelief. He pointed at a small gorge near the river delta, a naturally formed acoustic shadow zone surrounded by ridgelines. "They won't hear missiles coming if we hit them there. We wait." 7 minutes. That was all he needed. In that time, targeting coordinates were uploaded to 3 Burevy MLRS platforms, hidden 22 miles inland. At the same moment, a Ram-2 kamikaze drone was scrambled from a nearby forward airstrip. 2 Neptune cruise missiles, retrofitted for naval strike, were loaded into mobile launchers parked beneath camouflage netting. No expensive jets, no large-scale artillery. just a handful of weapons chosen for stealth, speed, and devastating precision. The plan was simple. Wait for Russia to enter the kill box, then erase them. By 03:23 a.m., everything was in position. Russia, still believing in its perfect infiltration, continued cruising westward. Ukraine had drawn a line, not on a map, but in time. Please support us by liking and subscribing to our channel. The real firestorm is about to begin. Don't blink. At 04:42 a.m., the Russian convoy entered the designated kill zone, an inlet surrounded by steep banks and soft marshland, perfect for absorbing radar signals, but also a natural sound trap. Inside this acoustic shadow, the roar of engines echoed inward, but nothing from the outside could be heard. Unaware they were being watched, the 6 Russian ferries maintained their tight formation, each vessel spaced precisely 40 meters apart to avoid collision. They were 120 kilometers from their landing point, but now just 17 seconds from destruction. At 04:42:13, a single command was transmitted from the Ukrainian war room: execute. The first strike came from inland. 3 Burovai MLRS launchers hidden in a wheat field unleashed a full salvo of 80 220mm rockets. Designed for saturation attacks, each rocket carried a high explosive fragmentation warhead capable of shredding armor and incinerating troops in open air. The rockets arced upward, then screamed down onto the water in a tight grid formation. 4 seconds later, the second layer of the attack struck. A Ram-2 kamikaze UAV, a converted Leleka 100 drone, dived from 5,000 feet at a 70-degree angle. Its 4-kilometer tandem charge warhead punched straight through the wheelhouse of the lead ferry before detonating, igniting secondary explosions from onboard munitions. The shockwaves staggered the remaining vessels. But it wasn't over. From 60 kilometers away, 2 R-360 Neptune cruise missiles streaked in low over the waves, flying just 15 feet above sea level to avoid radar detection. Using TERCOM, terrain contour matching, and active radar seeker heads, they locked onto the heat signatures of the ferry engines. One missile impacted dead center on the command ship. The second hit a vessel carrying fuel reserves, resulting in a fireball that lit up the entire inlet like daylight. In less than 150 seconds, the sea was boiling with fire, smoke, and screams. Russian soldiers jumped into the cold water only to be swallowed by shrapnel, waves, or fuel-fed flames. The assault was over almost as quickly as it began. The result? All 6 ferries destroyed. All 24 armored vehicles lost. Over 320 Russian troops either killed or missing. Only 4 survivors were later picked up. Burned, dazed, and incoherent. What made this strike historic wasn't just the scale of destruction. It was the efficiency. Ukraine had used no fighter jets, no satellites, and no billion-dollar systems. Just a drone, a few rockets, a tactical brain, and perfect timing. What is more painful than failure? The fear of admitting it. Russia uses silence to hide an indelible shame. By 04:47 a.m., the Black Sea was once again calm, at least to the satellites. 6 ferries had vanished beneath the surface. Oil fires crackled across the water. Charred hull fragments floated like tombstones, and hundreds of Russian soldiers were unaccounted for. But in Moscow, there was no announcement, no televised statement, no acknowledgement of the loss. The Russian Ministry of Defense remained silent. Its evening briefing made no mention of the amphibious group. Russian state media shifted focus to unrelated naval exercises in the Arctic, even as dozens of independent tracking accounts showed a complete signal blackout from the amphibious fleet since 03:30. Privately, panic had begun. At the GRU headquarters in Khimki, internal messages labeled the operation a probable compromise. A leaked intercepted call, shared by anti-Kremlin groups, recorded an FSB agent stating, "The convoy's gone. We don't even have black boxes. It's like they were waiting for us." The Kremlin's worst fear had materialized. A total tactical failure, exposed not by NATO satellites or advanced espionage, but by a low-cost Ukrainian drone and smart battlefield patience. Estimates compiled by Western analysts were devastating. Over $120 million in Russian hardware lost in under 3 minutes. The Southern Command lost a mechanized detachment critical for the Mykolaiv offensive. A 48-hour delay in Russia's push northward due to supply line collapse. Ukrainian officials, meanwhile, made no effort to hide the strike. At noon, General Vashchenko appeared briefly before cameras, stating simply, "When invaders come by sea, they should expect to drown." The world listened. Pentagon analysts praised the operation as a textbook case in low-cost denial warfare. European media dubbed it the Bay of Blinds. But what truly rattled Russian military thinkers wasn't the firepower, it was the recon breakthrough. Their so-called radar blind spot had been decoded, not neutralized. Ukraine hadn't jammed it, they had learned to see through it. The PD-2 drone's use of thermal layering and loitering altitude had outmaneuvered Russian counter-recon algorithms. This meant any future landing attempt using that corridor was now suicide. And worse, the soldiers' bodies couldn't be recovered. Families would receive no coffins, only silence. It was not just a tactical defeat, it was a psychological collapse. And for the Kremlin, silence was no longer a shield, it was a confession. In a war defined by billion-dollar weapons and satellite-guided precision, a modified drone costing less than a new pickup truck had just rewritten the rules. The PD-2 reconnaissance drone used in the Black Sea operation was worth only $30,000. It didn't fire a missile, it wasn't fast, it didn't even carry a weapon, but its value lay in what it saw, and how fast it reported. Every 10 seconds, it delivered live thermal imaging, GPS coordinates, and motion tracking straight to the Ukrainian command bunker. While Russian commanders relied on false confidence and presumed blind zones, Ukraine relied on real-time data and patience. That patience, multiplied by precision, became lethal. "Don't shoot until you can end it," General Vashchenko would later tell junior officers at a military academy. "You don't need to scare the enemy, you need to remove them." And that's exactly what Ukraine did. The operation used 3 Buravai rocket launchers, not high-end artillery, but legacy systems optimized with grid targeting. A Ram-2 loitering drone made from a modified surveillance platform with a 4-kilo tandem charge. 2 R-360 Neptune missiles, originally designed to hit warships, repurposed for pinpoint strikes on slow-moving watercraft. None of these systems were revolutionary on their own. But combined under the right timing and intelligence, they became devastatingly efficient. This wasn't just a victory, it was a statement. That Ukraine could deliver crippling damage without needing foreign fighter jets or top-tier assets. The cost of the entire ambush, rockets, drones, and missiles included, was estimated at under $2 million. Meanwhile, Russia lost over $120 million, dozens of armored vehicles, and more than 300 elite soldiers in under 3 minutes. Perhaps more importantly, Ukraine didn't just protect territory, they changed perception. NATO analysts began citing the attack in briefings as a case study in asymmetric warfare. In the US, retired Admiral James Grady remarked, "It's not about how loud your gun is, it's about when you pull the trigger, and who's watching the target before you do." The sea was quiet again, but the message was loud. This war would not be won by brute force, it would be won by vision, velocity, and the kind of thinking that turns $30,000 into a strategic earthquake. In a war often measured by the weight of tanks, the cost of missiles, or the number of divisions on a map, Ukraine's ambush on the Black Sea proved something far more unsettling to its enemies. This is no longer a war of might, but a war of minds. A $30,000 drone, silent, unarmed, and unseen, triggered a chain of decisions that wiped out an entire Russian amphibious force in under 3 minutes. There were no flashy fighter jets, no carpet bombing, just timing, intelligence, and precision. The Ukrainian military didn't need overwhelming firepower. They needed only the clarity to wait and the wisdom to strike at the perfect second. Russia lost over $120 million in equipment, 24 armored vehicles, and hundreds of soldiers, not in a prolonged battle, but in a surgical execution. The sea became their grave, and the silence from the Kremlin spoke louder than any headline. For Ukraine, this wasn't just a victory. It was a turning point, a moment that showed their commanders could outthink a larger army, that courage and cunning could overcome steel and numbers. And for the world watching, especially those of us who remember the Cold War, who've seen decades of global conflict. This moment should echo loudly, because it asks a question no general can ignore. What happens when intelligence becomes more dangerous than firepower? What would America do in the same situation? Would we wait? Would we strike? Or would we hesitate, like Russia did? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story gripped you, if you believe in the power of strategy over brute force, consider subscribing. Your support helps us bring these real stories of modern warfare to light. This wasn't just a battle, it was a warning. And somewhere, another drone may already be watching.